Yeah, well, editorial's expensive, so people don't wanna spend the money. It's just unfortunate. Nobody wants to spend money right now on human curation, but human curation is what makes things special. We all know, not everything's gonna be successful. It's just not. But the digital means of hurling spaghetti at the wall versus the human-focused way of curating the spaghetti that you throw against the wall, I think the human curation just works better because people respond to it more.
Welcome to The Creative Asylum, a weekly podcast that digs deep into the minds of visionary creators of all stripes. Musicians, actors, filmmakers, writers, artists, cartoonists, and cultural disruptors. Here, we'll discuss perspectives of living life on your own terms. Life lessons that keep us grounded and sane, and sometimes pull us back from the edge. So, take a deep breath, loosen your grip on the bland and the boring. This is your weekly prescription for authentic living, creative clarity, and hopefully, a little bit of cultural rebellion.
Side effects may include spontaneous joy, existential epiphanies, and an uncontrollable urge to do weird and beautiful things.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Creative Asylum. I'm your host, Daniel House, and today's conversation is with an old friend of mine, Victor Krummenacher. You may know him from Camper Van Beethoven, or you might know him from Eyelids, or maybe Monks of Doom, or maybe his more current outfit, The Third Mind. He's an amazing musician. He's an amazing designer. He's an amazing thinker. And we actually recorded this back in November. So kind of at a time when I had so many people saying yes, I brought in all takers and said, yeah, let's do this, and then realized I had a backlog. Good problem to have, I suppose, but I wish there wasn't such a delay between when we spoke and when you get to see the conversation, but here it is. A very dear friend of mine, Victor Krummenacher. Hello, Victor. How are you, sir?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm okay. It's good to see you. How's Portland?
Well, right now it looks like it might actually be sunny, so
Oh, well,
that's good. And it's kind of crisp and overcast on the morning walk, but
you've been there what? You've been a couple of years now, right?
5 years,
Oh, it's been
almost
that
6.
long? Wow.
Yeah.
Time
Yeah, time
flies.
flies when you're having
Yeah,
fun.
that is crazy. Well, you've been having a lot of fun from what I can
I
tell.
mean, I somehow or another, it's certainly been a juggle for the last
Yeah.
several years, but, I think that's just the case for everybody right now.
Well, I don't think most people plan as many different musical projects as you do.
Yeah, I mean, that's always been kind of a plus and minus, I
Uh-huh.
think, on some levels. But I'm just in a situation right now where, like a lot of people my age, I got laid off, and I have time to play music. So,
Yeah.
and it's really, truly one of the only things that I'm making a chunk of money doing, which is amazing in its own right that I'm actually even making money. So,
Yeah.
it's not like it's completely, I have to juggle a lot of plates, and go back and forth between design work and
Hmm.
consulting and, everything. And somehow or another, I've just barely been making it work for the last 2 years.
Something
So,
I've always kind of admired about you is that you sort of are a jack of all trades. I mean, you play music, but you do design and, you also do video editing, as you did a couple videos for me a couple years
yeah,
ago.
I do, yeah, design, video work, music business consulting, all sorts of weird things, you know?
You are a creative Renaissance man, I suppose. We'll just say that.
Well, just, trying in the context of this world where all of this stuff, I mean, even 3 or 4 years ago, the volume of money that I could bring in doing all this stuff is quite different. It's really changed pretty profoundly, which I think is kind of a harbinger of where we're at technologically. So that is, concerning, but it's broad based. It's not just me who's feeling it. Everybody I know is feeling it on a certain level.
And when you say technology, you're talking about like what, AI or
AI
just
primarily. I
yeah,
think not AI is actually a reality, but well, it's a reality in this way in that, a lot of the people because I worked in tech sector and a lot of people
yeah.
in that sector spent a lot of money putting these systems in, and I don't think they're getting any, ROI on it per se. And so they've between kind of economic instability and, political state, they've cut back profoundly. So a lot of people I know who were gainfully employed in kind of tech design world for years are not right now. And that applies to journalism and all the other things that I've basically been associated with. So
I keep hearing a lot of prediction about a huge AI bubble bursting and the potential economic catastrophic effects that that could reap.
I think that's accurate. I mean, from what I've seen, it's not really paying off. And I think AGI has been 5 years away for 15 years. And I think we don't really have AI. I think
No.
specifically, it's worth pointing out that it's basically computing as we know it. It's just accelerated by the ability to data crunch, right? Which lends to insights, but it's basically, predictive modeling. AGI, elusive, may or may never come to pass, but the economy is basically built on it right now.
And right now, everything's overvalued by huge, huge numbers.
Yeah, and it's also the only thing that's actually showing growth in the economy. So it could be quite a bloodbath. And I think because I'm working with a group of people who are trying to do a music-based startup right now. One of the things we're observing is we go to these startup fairs and people are constantly throwing out the AI-powered something to do something, and none of which is necessarily solving problems that people need solved. And what people need solved right now is to make their lives easier technologically, not harder. Essentially, what people are doing are creating new tasks for people to do, and I don't think that's really going to solve the problem. And then it's all kind of hinged to this idea that we will at some point employ artificial intelligence, and that's going to, if my reading is correct, it's going to unemploy everybody but make everything better at the same time. So we're going to basically destroy the creative economy entirely, and yet it's going to improve our lives. It's just, it's the usual bullshit.
Uh-huh.
And I think a lot of it is just sales, essentially.
And marketing.
And it's
Don't
just
forget marketing.
sales and marketing, yeah, and hype. And I'm just trying to exist around it right now because I mean, it's not that I don't use AI in some function. It's a great copy editor.
Yeah, there's some really great tools. There's some really fun tools too.
Yeah, and I'm a shitty copy editor. And I'm contemplating actually trying it for some video stuff. I mean, I have used AI empowered algorithms. I don't even know how AI they are, but like I use Topaz AI because I use a lot of old source footage that's been digitized and it's crappy. And Topaz is helpful. I mean, it's AI modeling. I guess it's just data crunching modeling. They just have a bunch of predictive models that work with images that you throw at it, and then it basically upscales it based on that. And it looks a little false. It's a little uncanny valley, but it's definitely an improvement. I'm not technologically opposed. I never really have been. But, when we're in such a kind of existential point and as far as the human's place on the planet, I encourage a more kind of common sense view of it, which is to say it can be helpful, but it's not going to save us.
I didn't think we were going to go off on this AI tangent, but I'm fascinated with it.
Well, we can't. I mean, because I have to exist in it.
Oh yeah, no, I think it's a huge part of the world we're in, and I think it's a huge part of the creative ecosystem, or it's a huge threat to the creative ecosystem. I'm not sure.
Essentially, where a lot of this thinking came from is that about a year ago, I started working with several people I knew in Portland on a music-based startup that's really rooted in a marketplace idea. Which is essentially no different than Bandcamp or Subvert, which is the new product. But our angle on it is to try and employ some kind of social media into the product that allows people to communicate directly with their fan base. And as we've been ideating on these tools, we have a demo, but we're hardly done.
Uh-huh.
And in talking with people about it, what we found, and I've been through the startup game a couple times, is that everybody is kind of like we were discussing, is working with the AI hype right now. There is very little investment right now, especially in music. Music's notoriously difficult to invest in and make money.
Right. But if you connect AI, those two letters, suddenly there's people with money, right?
Right. And I haven't seen any really effective thinking. I'm seeing things where there's like blockchain usage, essentially making like music-based NFTs. Certainly people are using AI for data metrics and things like that. But primarily what I find too, on a personal front, having done this for a long time, and you've done this too, marketing, getting above the noise in the world of social media is extraordinarily difficult.
Yeah.
As yet, I don't know how AI solves that problem.
I'm not sure how AI solves any problems, really. I see a bunch of tools, some of which are really fun, and some of which I think perhaps create efficiencies in terms of streamlined workflows and process. And I think if you use them as tools as opposed to using them as solutions, then maybe you're onto something. But I think for the amount of money and investment and hype that goes into these things as tools, they're being positioned and marketed as these enormous solutions that will change everything. And I don't know that that is really what's going to happen.
No, I don't think so. I think it's going to create more noise that people
Uh-huh.
have to decipher through.
Right.
I tend to feel like in the music marketing world that going smaller and being more bespoke and more focused on a certain scene, as it
Hmm.
were, a certain group of people that you know is probably more effective ultimately.
So being more community based,
Being more community based.
whatever that community might look like.
Yeah, exactly. And I
Yeah.
think we're going to have to. I think the other thing where AI comes in is because, streaming is the dominant means of distributing music right now. And if you know what's happening in the world of Spotify, where, you know, what's the number? 50,000 AI created songs a day? 150,000? I don't know. It's
Right.
somewhere. It's crazy.
The number one song on Billboard just what, 2 weeks ago was an
Or the
AI
Billboard
song.
Country Charts was AI
I'm just like,
created, right?
what the fuck?
And then you have other intense gaming things where Spotify has an AI arm where they're making their own AI music and then they own the publishing for it.
Right. Right.
So it is basically, a reciprocal loop of finance. So these things they're just going to devalue music intensely over a period of time.
Uh-huh.
So essentially, streaming is a passive thing and most people are passive music consumers.
Yeah.
But as we dilute the products with AI created content that all just goes back to people who make it and are streaming it, people are going to be confronted with this very non-human background noise. And I think that those of us who care about human creativity are basically going to have to come up with alternative means of distribution. I
Uh-huh.
think that's just really what it comes down to. So
Yeah.
that's really my thinking right now and how to make that appealing to people who will give me money to develop the products. I don't know.
Yeah.
I certainly
Yeah.
have a lot of connections in the music world. I certainly have a
Right.
scene where I could actively build this out. I have a team that I'm working with. It's called Blurt.fm, and it's a good, smart group of people who have worked in music tech for years. But whether or not we can actually get the financing for it, we will see. You know
Yeah.
but we just keep trying because ultimately to me it's a kind of an existential problem that I think needs to be addressed. And in the meantime, while I'm actually playing music and actually touring and actually doing all of stuff and watching what kind of Trump's America is doing to it, a little
Uh,
disconcerting because people are freaked out, the economy's unstable, fewer people are going to venues,
yeah.
and it's across the board. It's for everybody I know, everybody.
Well, I think it extends far beyond music too, right? I mean,
Right, and I'm sure that the reason I had a good year this last year is because Camper Van Beethoven played. That's why. If it had just been the Third Mind, it would have been a lot more hand to mouth, and that's just the reality of where we're at. And also, I'm 60, so there's that too. It's not like the kids are clamoring at the door to
I
see us. You
I
know?
understand all too well.
Yeah, it's just the nature of it. This is the nature
Yeah.
of what we do. And it is.
Well, what does it say about the kids today and new music and they're being so inundated with music that isn't even organically produced and that you're seeing music showing up on the Billboard charts or, I'm just wondering what that does to the generic young person getting into music in their teens and 20s and how that's going to impact how they think about music, how they listen about music, how they search for music, moving forward in their life.
In as far as the generic person, I don't
Yes.
know that person too well.
No, I don't
Uh,
either. But that's probably the majority is I guess what I'm saying.
yeah, it is, and it's a good question. But what I do know is that there are a lot of young people who love their music as passionately as we did,
Yes.
who are somewhat disgusted with the
Uh-huh.
corporatocracy. We have an advisor at Blurt who lives in Seattle. He is very connected with the young punk scene, which is remarkably active. You have bands there that are doing live numbers that don't have records, who are 18, 19.
That's great.
And they're doing live numbers that I'm jealous of,
Right.
easily doing 400 or 500 people, easily. There's definitely the energy there.
Uh-huh.
There's definitely the defiance there. How to be a good, corporate steward of that energy and not betray them, I think is an answer that people have to contend with. People are not trusting of technology right now for good reason.
Yeah.
And we've been siloed into these realms like Meta and, X and, on and
Yeah.
on.
The whole technocracy, if that's a
Yeah,
word.
exactly. And it's like basically like we've got like a tech trinity of being an influencer,
And
where
I know you
you're
have Larry Ellison trying to take over multiple studios and
not
being,
trying, it's done,
well,
I mean, in
he's
many
done one
cases.
and he's trying to take over another one.
Yeah. I mean, they've got Paramount for sure, and then they're going for Warner's and
Right.
CNN and that whole thing. So, and then so that is really going to diminish our ability to communicate freely within certain paradigms. I mean, that's still not the aggregators, but those media companies are still quite powerful.
But there's a concern there, I think, about, the kind of content they're going to produce and to what degree
Absolutely.
is it going to increasingly become more and more a source of propaganda, whether it's overt or subliminal.
Or both, and I mean, I
Right.
think we're already all seeing AI slop
Sure.
in our feeds, and I've certainly watched friends of mine get bamboozled by it. So, it's
Yeah.
definitely this is where the idea of alternative means of distribution
Right.
comes from, and to the point where I'm, seriously contemplating going overseas to see if I can establish a corporation outside of the United States to do
Yeah.
it.
Well, you and I
You
talked
know,
about that a little bit, specifically in regard to the political reality that we've been having to endure, immediately right now, but over the last several years, particularly with Trump and his criminal gang of cronies.
right. And, the EU has all sorts of censorship problems as well. Certainly,
Uh-huh.
like the UK is hardly a walk in the park. Germany's got a lot of weird issues, as does Italy. Ireland seems a little bit cleaner
Uh-huh.
for probably historical reasons. So, no place is perfect, but there are some places that are just a little bit less inclined to insanity.
Or to full-blown autocracy.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, we're in the era of the autocrat.
True.
It seems pretty obvious.
Yeah. I mean, I just have to keep reminding myself and in conversations with other people that we've been through stuff before and I have to believe we'll get through this. But there are times when it's hard not to feel hopeless and just like we're screwed.
Right. Well, I think that's a rational response to it. And I
Yeah.
think that, I don't do well with the kind of hopium thing.
Uh-huh.
My assumption is that things are fucked, but
Maybe because they are.
yeah, but I'm also, for as kind of dour as as my reputation is sometimes, I am essentially an optimist and
I'm
only not an irrational optimist, just it's really kind of a faith-based mechanism of being hopeful because that's what you do, right? It's kind of like my mom's Catholic. If you really talk to my mom about being a Catholic, she'll say, I don't know that there's actually a heaven. But, faith is a mechanism. It's the same general principle. It's like I've just
yeah.
fight the good fight, right? That's really what it comes down to.
And there's also, I don't know, like I don't know how much you might identify with Buddhist thinking, but the belief that at the core people's true natures more than not are rooted in positive intention.
Yeah, I tend to think that, in my world, I mean, there's plenty of bad actors
Sure.
and people are self-interested and self-motivated. I think that's part of human nature, but to completely discount humanity because of the bad aspects of human nature to me is naive and also really super negative and also self-involved and self-important, and I can't abide by it.
I don't know that anybody I'm talking about on this particular podcast feels much need or willingness to abide by any of it.
I think we have to be defiant right now,
Oh,
and I
yeah.
It's the aggregation specifically that really drives me crazy. It's like everything's aggregated. Your news is aggregated,
Uh-huh.
your social media is aggregated, your music's aggregated, and those people are all making a fortune, and it's all on our backs. And I hate it. I hate that
Hmm.
dynamic because I feel like, when we were first working together, that was a small business model. And it was much healthier and, certainly in some ways more limited in its reach. In the mid 90s, Jonathan Sagal and I started a small label called Magnetic, and we had a website and
Uh-huh.
we did small publication, option, all those magazines, basically small,
Right.
like the $100 ads in the
Yeah.
back.
Yeah.
Like that's what we did. And, my first solo CD sold 4,000 copies through a PO box,
That's amazing.
right?
That's
I
fantastic.
know. That's crazy. We had some physical distribution, but most of it went through the PO box.
Hmm.
It was just kind of a daily ritual of going to
What year was that?
1995, 96.
Right.
And it was a daily ritual of like on my way to my shitty job. In the morning, I was working at a weekly paper and I'd go to the P.O. box
Uh-huh.
on the way to work and grab the envelopes, and there'd always be, 3, 4, 5 in there. And then I'd, put those in my backpack and come home and throw the CDs
Fill the
and
orders. Yeah.
yeah, fill the orders and then go to the post office the next day. And like, it was just a ritual.
But that was also before the World Wide Web took hold and.
Yeah, I mean, we did have a website and we got orders through it. We had a
Right.
really,
But
really
I'm just saying,
primitive
like,
shopping computer.
e-commerce wasn't what it is now. Like, everything
Well, it
is
wasn't Web
monetized, right?
2.0, that's for sure. No,
Yeah.
no, nothing like that. Nature, and now, I mean, even like Bandcamp, if you think about what Bandcamp is in relation to somebody who's been putting out his own records for years, it's just a way of taking 10% off of me rather than it going through my website. So note to kids, if you want it cheaper, you can buy it through my website because I charge less. But it's just what it is. It's just
But it's the difference of having to go, these are my 40 bands and 40 websites versus these are my 40 bands and I can get what I want between 2 or 3 websites.
that's right. Yeah, yeah,
You know.
exactly. And in principle, I understand it. And as I try and solve this problem with a group of people myself, I'm also cheering anybody who's trying to deal with it. So,
Uh-huh.
Subvert has an interesting idea, which is basically a web-based cooperative for a marketplace. And I don't know
Uh-huh.
if they'll be successful or not. Their branding seems kind of white papery to me on a certain level, but
Uh-huh.
hey, what do I know? I'm
Yep.
just the design director, but more power to him. I'm signed up and I'll be using that platform as well. Um,
Let me write Subvert down because I'm not
yeah,
familiar with them.
Subvert is interesting. Bandcamp I think is, I don't hate Bandcamp at all. I certainly
No?
use it, but they're really bootstrapped because they're owned by a large corporate behemoth and they don't have a
Right.
lot of operational money, and their website, from my understanding, is barely holding together. And
Mm.
there's a real chance that it could just kind of fall apart.
I know that I get more sales through Bandcamp than I do through CZ Records on records that are located in both places.
Same, yeah. I
You
mean,
know.
I get several $1,000s a year just through Bandcamp, and it's good. It's straightforward.
Yeah.
Don't hate it, but
No,
really think it could be better. It's a flat ecosystem, and there's
it
no
could be a
real way
lot
to
better.
yeah, there's no real way to market within the app.
There's no real good mechanism for discovery, and it seems like such a good platform for that.
Agreed, but they killed their editorial arm. It was a
Mm,
cost saving measure. So,
right. Always the
that's
first.
the
Always the
thing.
first to go. Always the first to
Yeah,
go.
well, editorial's expensive, so people don't want to spend the money. It's just unfortunate. Nobody wants to spend money right now on human curation, but human curation is what makes things special. And we all know, not everything's going to be successful. It's just not. But the digital means of hurling spaghetti at the wall versus the human-focused way of curating the spaghetti that you throw against the wall, I think the human curation just works better because people
Yeah,
respond to it more.
absolutely. Well, I had this conversation here on the Creative Asylum with Molly Newman. She used to run Lookout Records. She's the drummer in Bratmobile, and
Sure.
currently now she's the president of CD Baby. And we're both of an age enough to where we can remember the good old days before the World Wide Web, right?
Right.
And I was saying to her how much I really miss basically fanzine culture. So there was that time when you had your, let's say, half dozen fanzines that were the ones that you reliably like always went to and subscribed to, and you always had in your table, and you would read like cover to cover twice, maybe even 3 times before the next issue came. And you had your local college radio, which, in Seattle was KCMU before it was KEXP. And, it had its own editorial curated flavor that wasn't necessarily as corporate. It didn't necessarily mirror every other similar station in every other city. And similarly, you had labels that were very specifically tied to a scene or a style or an aesthetic. And you had these fanzines that were the same way. And I felt like I had a much easier time then actually discovering music than I do now. Even though the World
Agreed.
Wide Web opens the floodgates, but it opens the floodgates for everything. And now you're just kind of swimming, in this huge pool. And it's actually harder, I think, to discover music with the sort of normalization that the web has created for everybody. I mean, it's great that everybody has access, but it's also terrible that you have access to everybody.
Yeah, I think that's just it. I mean, curation becomes this is one of the things that we quite focus on right now is just like how to curate and how to generate, because fans are fans. If you're a
Uh-huh.
fan, I'm a fan, and you like it, you're going to pursue it.
Sure.
There are things I loved, but, artists fail, and occasionally, like, you get, like, something that you're not super stoked on. What I want is what I used to get from, say, Puncture, which was Steve Connell, who worked at Rough Trade. If they reviewed a record, there would be some thought, right?
Uh-huh.
It would
Uh-huh.
be a thoughtful, somewhat intellectual review and talk about why this album failed or why it succeeded, why it was good. You didn't necessarily have to disagree with it, but that dialogue was really helpful for me.
Yeah. And occasionally there are those writers who you disagreed with everything they said. And sometimes they might diss a record and you'd like, I have a pretty strong feeling I'm going to really like this record.
Right, exactly.
There were certain writers,
But
certain publications that I would almost always go against the things they hated the most. And almost every time it was something I loved.
it was interesting how fought those battles were at the time because, ultimately my point of view now is that, taste is taste, and I have no real time for snobbery. If you like Taylor Swift or whatever,
Yeah.
as long as you've got something that's cultural, it's enriching your life, I'm not going to complain about it.
But with more DIY or indie stuff, I guess my question is, how do you discover? I'm every bit the fan that I used to be. Like I have this private music group on Facebook that I created for a bunch of, similarly minded, rabidly curious music fanatics that post stuff every day. So it's a great tool for discovery. And I rely on that because for me, that's nourishment.
Right.
And it's great when I discover new stuff, but sometimes it's years later,
Yeah, it's always the case. For me, it still comes down, I have friends who are still, I have friends who are basically rock stars who are immersed in music all the time, who love it.
Uh-huh.
Thank God, they don't have the nagging financial need to go and immerse yourself in other things. So, those recommendations are very good for me because they can just kind of exist in the musical medium all the time.
Uh-huh.
There's always stuff. There's always stuff to find, and my tastes have changed quite a bit over the years, and what I'm listening to is in many cases quite different. But there's still, even in like jazz world, there's remarkable stuff that goes on. I have friends who knew about the Next for years. I didn't know anything about the Next until 3 or 4 years ago, and then once I discovered it, I couldn't get enough. And like, how the fuck
Uh-huh.
did I miss it? I was like, I just missed it.
Well,
This
yeah,
is what happens.
it's easy.
Yeah, they've been making music since the 1980s, and how the fuck did I miss this? But, whatever.
Right. Well,
Mhm.
I just did an interview with Joe Lally from Fugazi, but maybe I should
Yeah,
say I just had an interview with Joe Lally from the Mesthetics
right,
because
exactly.
because those are like completely different audiences,
They
and
are. We're friends. Eyelids are friends with Brendan, and I love that they've gone in that direction. It's like fantastic, and they come from that really earnest like musical exploration
yeah,
thing,
for
which
sure.
is it's the great thing. The beauty of music, if you're open to it, it kind of keeps you naive, right?
Uh-huh.
You keep learning, you keep refining, you keep getting, it's one of the odd things you can physically get better at. I'm old enough
Right.
now to feel my body doing all sorts of things I'm not particularly fond of, but my
Yeah.
playing is better.
If you're enjoying this conversation, please make sure you hit that follow button so you never miss an episode. If you're watching on YouTube, please like this video, leave a comment, And if you haven't already, please subscribe. It's the quickest way to grow our channel, and it's absolutely free. You can also subscribe to our other channels on social media. Check out our Instagram at Creative Asylum CA, that's the letter CA, or on TikTok at The Creative Asylum, that's all one word. Our website is thecapod.com, and our Facebook profile is the same, facebook.com/thecapod. All right, back to the episode. How many bands are you more or less actively in these days? I mean, I know Monks of Doom isn't full-time, but Monks of Doom seems to be a lot of the time.
Yeah, like the Monks are currently talking about doing some recording in 2026. It really comes down more or less to Immergluck and his availability and getting Chris over from Australia.
Uh-huh.
But I think there's a real solid desire to do at least some more recording with that band and maybe some West Coast
Like
shows.
writing new material.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of have this concept right now.
Mm-hmm.
We want to do this kind of minimal, like we just basically want to do an EP. And what we're really trying to do is figure out how we can get Tucker Martine paid. Because Tucker, who's a pretty notable producer and is my neighbor in Portland, grew up seeing the Monks and he loves the band.
Uh-huh.
So I'm just trying to figure out how can we afford to do like a 12-inch, like an EP with him. So that's definitely been openly discussed quite a bit, and we're
Right.
just trying to figure out how to make that work. Camper Van Beethoven played this year. There is a chance that we won't play again, but I think the experience was positive enough that we're contemplating it. Certainly, if we don't play as a full band, I can almost guarantee that at some point I'll play some music with David Lowery again.
And probably just for clarity for the listeners and viewers, we're recording this in 2025, but this episode won't be released until 2026. So
26, yeah. So yeah, we played in
it'll be last year.
yeah, we played in 2025. Whether we're playing in 2026, I'm not sure. I wouldn't be surprised if we did or didn't.
Uh-huh.
You know, I think most people who know Camper know it's not always the easiest relationship, but yet
Right.
it's special enough to us, and I think there's enough whatever animosities exist from time to time. I think we all care about each other, and I think we've all proved that to each other. So we are working on reissuing all the albums on vinyl. That's actually kind of one of my day jobs right now. So
I was going to say your fan base is just,
they're solid. They're great.
it's amazing.
Yeah, they're really that band struck and I think there's two things about it. One is that for the people it struck with, it struck really hard and they adore it. The other thing too is that the band is kids like Camper Van Beethoven.
Uh-huh.
And so it's been able to extend across age ranges in ways that other projects I've done have not. And in many ways, the way I look at it is that it's bigger than any of us.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
you know, there's almost like a social responsibility to it. It brings a lot of joy to people.
Yeah.
So, you know, I've known David Lowery since I was 14, 15, something like that. So when you have that long of a relationship, you know, I'm not clamoring to go and spend a month on the road with him because he'll drive me crazy, but I'll probably drive him crazy in return. So there's no,
Right.
you know, I think there's just an understanding at the age we are that, you know, whatever we get to do, whether it's just, you know, a David Lowery show with Greg and I playing with him, or it's a camper show, whatever, any of those things are special for the people who love it.
How old were you guys when Camper first started, you and David?
I was 18.
Okay.
I had literally just graduated from high school.
All right.
And I knew David Lowery and Chris Mola from the punk rock scene in the Inland Empire, which is very, very small.
Okay, so it was from the Inland Empire. It was not from Santa Cruz.
Yeah, I grew up outside of Los Angeles, and so really what happened was that there was a very small punk rock scene in Riverside that was directly connected with the Germs.
That's actually in the Private Lives of Bill Bartell. He
Bartell,
talks
right.
about all of that.
Yeah, so Darby's boyfriend was who I bought my first bass from.
Okay.
And then as soon as I got to know those people, Darby killed himself more or less on the same day that John Lennon got shot.
Mhm.
And then that scene kind of started to atomize in a certain way. Maybe like 81 was like the zenith of it. It was before people really started to die, morbidly enough. But David Lowery and I met at a punk rock party, basically. And his taste in music, you know, like the people I was hanging out with, the Germs and the Damned, and fairly hard, you know, harder stuff. And 45 Grave, like the post-Germs band, and
Yep. I
all
remember
that stuff was okay. But I liked the Buzzcocks, and Lowry liked the Buzzcocks, and there was a
Uh-huh.
certain, and you know, we both loved the Fall, and that was the kind of common ground for all the camper guys, was the Fall in a weird way.
Really?
Yeah,
That's
nobody
bizarre.
ever. It was the Fall, and actually, there was a record called Money Mountain by this band called the Blue Orchids, which was a Martin Brahmas spinoff from the Fall, and we all love that record, and that's really. That and, like, the Chocolate Watch Band and
Ah,
garage
yes.
music,
Yes.
were, and Kaleidoscope, David Lindley's old band, like, those
Uh-huh.
were really the big, like, kinda aha. That didn't really line up with the LA scene so much, and the other thing too is that David Lowery and the bands he was in at they could play a song all the way through. The bands I was in could barely play a song, much
Well,
less finish it.
that's how you start.
Right, so you just wanted to be around older people. So, you know, that's a long relationship.
Did Camper Van start there, or did Camper Van start in Santa Cruz?
Yeah, we started in David Lowery's mother's kitchen in
Oh, really?
1983.
I never
Yeah.
knew that.
It was a summer project. He was going to school at Santa Cruz, as was Chris Mola. They were both home staying at their parents in the summer. We saw each other at a party. He said, "Do you want to play some music?" And you know, just like a summer project. And I said, "Sure." So we just released the demos that were recorded that summer in Margaret's kitchen.
Really?
Yeah, there's a re-release of Telephone Free Landslide Victory, and the CD bonus disc is the 1983 demos.
Oh, that's so cool.
You know, I sent those demos to Bruce Fleischer at Independent Project, and he loved it and said almost immediately, "I'll put out a record." And we were all going to UC. I was going to UC Riverside, and it was just an era where you could just transfer. Like, hey, I'll just go from UC Riverside to UC Santa Cruz, because you just
Right.
basically filed for a transfer. And being I was at Santa Cruz, and we started, that was into 83 that I moved up there. And we started, and the weird thing is we all had more serious bands. David was in a band called Box to Laughs, and I was in a band called the Wrestling Worms, of all things, but it was one of Gillian Welch's favorite bands, because she was also going to UC Santa Cruz. And we did these shows with Camper, and everybody loved it. It was way more popular from the get-go, just kind of organically, than anything else we were doing.
A side project that ended up eclipsing everything else.
Exactly, and so we just went for it. So we recorded an album for $500. Well, I mean, maybe it was 1,000, I can't remember, it was ridiculously cheap. It was not more than $1,000 that we
Yeah.
spent.
Yeah.
In a garage studio in Davis, California, where Game Theory had recorded, and gave that to Bruce, and he put it out, and then Skinhead started getting radio airplay, and then I gave a copy of it to Peter Buck and Michael Stipe, and they asked us to go on tour, which meant getting a booking agent, and we got signed to Venture Bookings, and that was it.
That's a pretty nice gift for a young man first starting out.
Yeah, it was a rocket ship.
It's amazing.
I was on the road by 20, so.
Right. So how long did that last until it finally broke up and before you started Monks of Doom?
Camper went until 1990.
Okay.
The Monks kind of started because already, I mean, we're just such a precocious. I mean, that's, I think, one of Larry's observations that I think is very accurate about Camper is that anybody in that band could be a band leader.
Uh-huh.
It's a very smart, very competitive group of people, which is where a lot of attention came from. Like, Larry had the beat on the songs that communicated better than anybody else.
Uh-huh.
But there were a lot of wild musical ideas, and if you actually really watch the trajectory of Camper, we were coming up in the era of Sonic Youth, Butthole Surfers, you know, a lot of noisy stuff, and we were playing with those bands.
Right.
We played with all the SST bands. We, like, Minutemen, Meat Puppets, Huskers, I mean, all those bands we did multiple shows with. And Dead Kennedys. Like, we had these snarky kind of poppy songs, silly
Uh-huh.
songs, and then, like, these really intense psychedelic explorations, and, you know, we're playing Pink Floyd songs, and so there's this really wild, almost unmanageable way that Camper was playing. When we got signed, you know, obviously the pressure was to make it a little bit more Catholic, and so there was a kind of a creative side that atomized. It just completely fell apart, and the Monks were basically a response to that.
Right.
Because I just couldn't, like, I had too many ideas.
Uh-huh.
So it was ironic. I had to quit that band, the Wrestling Worms, because Camper was on the road all the time. So the Monks just became a side project where, because we all knew when we were off, right? Because it was all basically camper
Right.
members. We all basically knew, like, we will not be touring at this time so we can get some other stuff done. And Larry didn't like it. He was quite competitive about it. And, I mean, we were dicks about it too. I wouldn't say there was any innocent party in it. And then basically camper just evolved interpersonally to a point where it was kind of intolerable to be around it. And we left. And that's when the Monks
Right.
became kind of the dominant band.
Yeah. I had always assumed that Camper Van broke up and it had to do with tensions with David, and that's why pretty much the core of Camper.
It did. That's just the truth of the matter, and he was a really difficult person at that point, and we were very young, and there was no we're also of a specific age, and I think you can relate to this, is like, I didn't get any guidance on anything,
Sure.
I was raised by a single mom, and I'm from a very, classically Irish Catholic, alcoholic, codependent family. That's just what I am from, and so it doesn't
Right.
teach you how to deal with conflict well, and
Hmm.
I think, if there are any specific regrets, it's just not managing those band conflicts very well, and certainly, I don't know that that would have saved the band from breaking up, and I don't actually regret walking out so much as I regret how I walked out. So,
Well, also, when you're in your 20s and you're on this meteoric rise and experience, you're not really. I think there's probably some arrested development there where you're not really
oh,
necessarily
yeah,
developing
completely.
emotionally. You're not evolving as a person. You're kind of stuck in this. If you've ever seen that Some Kind of Monster, the Metallica movie, I
Oh, yeah.
think about the fact that like they kind of became huge still in their teens.
Yeah.
And to me, what I'm seeing is when I see them sitting in this therapist's office, I'm like, these are a bunch of adults that have never really matured into adulthood,
No, and
you
and
know?
the other thing that bands are notoriously good at, first of all, you don't mature very normally because
Hmm.
you're in
Yeah.
these kind of hyper real environments. It's a very focused environment, and I
Yeah.
think there's the reason that it's kind of like a drug being in a band is life is very simple, especially when you're on the road
Yeah.
or you're making a record. Like life is like get up, eat, do the thing, play the music, get on to the next town, or record the next song. It's life is simple and it's focused, and I think it's very addictive because a lot of problems can kind of, the shit that we all have to deal with as human beings is just kind of relegated to
Right. And
second
you
place.
and you get a whole kind of attention that you don't get anywhere else in life.
Absolutely, and you're told you're very special, and
Right.
even if you're not really, that's also unhealthy in its own way. And then the other thing too is whatever baggage you have with what happened in your family, you bring it into the band, especially when you're young.
Yeah.
And that is the profound difference in bands that I've been in as an older person
Uh-huh.
versus a younger band. Like I work with people who are, can be plenty moody and, have all of their things, but we're at a point where nobody's going to inflict that on anybody else. Like if you're in a bad
You're
mood, you leave the room,
you're playing
right?
with
You don't.
adults now. Adults playing
Yeah,
with each other, right?
exactly. People who have respect for one another.
So let's talk a little bit about that. So, with that, we can pivot to Eyelids and The Third Mind, because those are sort of the
Yeah,
predominant bands you're in currently, correct?
yeah. Those are eyelids is kind of on a break right now. We're looking at some 2026 work.
Uh-huh.
Financially, eyelids is a hard one just
Yeah.
because it's difficult. There's not as large a reputation to kind of
Uh-huh.
work with. Yet, really beautiful pop music,
Yeah.
uh, really smart, thoughtful, crazy song structures, two great songwriters,
Uh-huh.
great drummer, really good guitar player, loud as fuck, but I can handle that.
Is
Um,
Eyelids based in Portland?
Based in Portland, most of the stuff has been produced by Peter Buck,
Okay.
which has been great to work with Peter on that stuff. The last album we did was called A Colossal Waste of Light, and it won the Oregon Music Hall of Fame's Album of the Year award.
That's wonderful.
So, it's in certain town, it's one of those bands where like Brooklyn, great, Cleveland, okay. Milwaukee, why did we do this?
Right.
Eh, but like Portland, that band is as large in Portland as as Camper or The Third Mind.
Right.
It's a sellout 400 seat band. And, just because financially, I think Chris and John really kind of beat themselves up on it. And, we did a lot of touring a few years ago. We did several national tours. And I think just financially, we're just looking at the bottom line going like, we can't sustain this.
Right.
So John plays drums in the Decemberists, and I just said, well, why don't you just step back and then, get together when it works. And, we're just having a conversation right now about how to go forward. And that, but I love playing with those guys. It's a very kind, fun group of people,
Uh-huh.
and they're hardly perfect. They have their issues, as all bands do,
Like
but
any band.
like any band. But nonetheless, the energy is really good. So I'm hoping to at least play a few shows next in 2026 and
Uh-huh.
maybe do a single. We'll just see
Yeah.
what they want to do. I'm just the bass player, although I'm a bit of a ringleader with just because I like to do it. And then the other band that I've been really surprisingly involved in. So I've known Dave Alvin since I was 20.
Wow, really?
I think 20.
Like Blasters days?
When Billy Zoom left X, we did a tour of California opening for X, and Dave became the lead guitar player. And we had met on the road when he was playing in his last tour with the Blasters
Yeah.
in Oklahoma City. Ironically, we wound up hanging out and getting drunk. And so we always got along. He kind of older brother role for me on a certain level.
Uh-huh.
Was always, his taste was just in a world that I had no understanding of. So 85, 86, we opened for X, and I got to know him a little bit then. And then a few years later, he was Sid Straw's musical director. And Sid Straw was on Virgin, which Camper Van Beethoven was signed to. And Sid opened for Camper for like 3 months,
Uh-huh.
did a full national with them. And I got to know Dave Alvin and Willie Aaron, who's also in the Third Mind. Both at that point were in Sid's band, and we would be doing like record store appearances in stores, and I'd be looking like a Nick Cave record, and it's like, why are you looking at that? Why don't you get a McCoy Tyner CD?
Nice.
So it was that kind of mentorship. And then
But why can't you
we
do
just
both?
we just remained friends, and I loved, especially when he started, when it took a while for his solo career to really start manifesting, but he
Uh-huh.
was great at putting together these bands that it would be very straightforward, kind of blues-based Americana, which is
Right.
fine, and I like
Right.
music like that quite a bit. But then there would be these moments, because he always had a moment where he'd stretch out. It's like, what the fuck is
Yeah.
this?
Yeah.
Because it was like
Yeah.
the Led Zeppelin live thing. You just never, was never really on his records, but it was always good, and those bands were great. And I watched him with several bands, and I just got known, like, we were friends, and I would just call his road manager and get on the list and go and see him. And I learned a lot about how to play music watching him. This has got to be 10 years ago, maybe more. We were talking, and he was offered a residency at Slim's.
Uh-huh.
And in typical Dave Alvin fashion, he was like, how do I fuck with this? And he basically came up with this idea that he wanted to play trucking with a different style band. And he was serious about it. So he was going to have the psychedelic band, and he asked me to play bass in that. I was like, yeah, that'd be great. He was going to do it with like a Dixieland brass band and a blues band, and he was going to do all these different iterations of trucking. And
Uh-huh.
then I can't remember I think he was trying to be in Tom Waits' band or something at the time, and that couldn't happen. So a few years later, I left the Bay Area and wound up being in LA, and we were texting, and I said, that crazy idea you had? It's like, yeah, it's like, what if I put together a band and we just went in the studio and tried something? He's like, okay, well, let's just try it. So, when you're trying to put together projects like this, you never are successful with the initial phone call being a yes, right?
Uh-huh.
You're always struggling to get it. And I called Michael Jerome, who plays drums for Richard Thompson and had played with John Cale, and Charlie Musselwhite / you can go down a list of crazy people. Called Michael, and he's like, I'm free.
Uh-huh.
Call David Immergluck, I'm free. Call the studio, they're free. Turns out the studio and Michael Jerome's rehearsal space were in the same building. So I just called Dave and said, we're all free on this day. This never happens. Never on the first phone call. I was like, we just should do it. And he's like, well, what do we do?
There's some
And I
magic
was like,
happening.
yeah, I was like, do you want to do trucking? He's like, nah, we need to do something. I need something edgier than that. And I was like, well, what about East West? And he's like, okay, I'm down.
Uh-huh.
Because he loves Mike Bloomfield. East West
Yeah.
is an
Yep.
old modal song by the Paul Butterfield Blues Band.
Yep. I know it.
So we basically got in a room. We kind of all knew each other. Michael had toured with Dave with Richard, with Dave opening for Richard, and Emmy knew Dave from that Sid Straw tour. And we just sat down without any expectations and played 3 versions of East West, and by the time we were done, we were crap to sweat in the studio, and Dave's like, "Let's make a record." And so we just
Wow.
kind of threw it together, and then the response to it was great. And
Yeah.
so it's a great band. It's really,
It's
and,
an
and
amazing
then
band.
Dave had the idea of bringing in Jesse, because
I was going to
Jesse,
ask how she entered in. Yeah.
yeah, and he said, why don't you talk with Jesse and see how you feel about working with her? Because I think she'd do a great job. Because we did want to do a Grateful Dead song. We wanted to do, but we wanted to do Morning Dew, and Jesse was all over it. And
Mhm.
she's magnificent. She's like the only voice I can think of that would actually really work. And then it kind of became a band. We were slated to go on the road right before COVID. We were actually getting ready to go on rehearsals, and it was going to be, I don't know if you know this, but it was Dave, Michael, myself, Jesse, and Kim Fay all signed on.
Really?
Just because Emmy can't really tour because of Counting Crows obligations. So, and we've all known Kim forever, and Dave called Kim, and he's like, "Yeah, I'll do it." He's like, "I don't know if I'm up for it." And he's like, "You just have to make noise in the key of D. You'll be fine." And so,
I have a hard time. I'll be honest. I have a hard time imagining Kim in the Third Mind.
it was an odd choice, but we were getting ready. Like getting ready to go on rehearsals. I was having long phone conversations with Kim, and he was working on stuff, and then like COVID happened, and it all went away. And then Dave got cancer.
Right.
So
But he's beat
we
it now,
didn't.
right?
Yeah, he's cancer free. Is how
Okay.
when you're stage 4, I think that's where we go.
Yeah.
He's healthy enough to tour, and if there's anybody who's alive because of music, that man is.
Mhm. Whose idea was it to cover Journey to Satchidananda?
That was mine. It was
Okay.
just kind of another kind of like, the curation primarily comes from Dave or I. We just kind of text back and forth ideas.
Uh-huh.
On the last record, Jesse had a couple ideas she wanted to throw in. So that's where Reap What You Sow, which is an old kind of Dwayne, well, it's actually a Nick Gravenitis, Michael Bloomfield song, but Dwayne Allman is known
Version.
for his version, and
Right.
Otis Rush. But yeah, we just kind of throw ideas back and forth. And the weird thing is when Dave had gone through his cancer treatment and was in recovery, he called me. COVID was winding down, and he's like, "Hey, look, I'm starting to record again, and the first thing I want to do is a Third Mind record." And I was like, "Wait, what?" And he's like, "Yeah, I just feel like we were interrupted, and I just really want to do something." And
Uh-huh.
we hadn't seen I hadn't seen anybody in 2 years because COVID was just such.
Yeah.
You would forget how much time we lost. I lost 2 years basically sitting in my basement doing design work. And I moved to Portland and just basically wound up sitting in my basement doing worked, in this room for like a year and a half. And it's amazing how much time just kind of evaporated. But when we got back together, the chemistry was even better. And, it's interesting when you bring together such an established group of musicians, everybody's got their egos and their way of doing things. And like Emmys and the Counting Crows, which is, a really, band's got some money, and they're used to running a certain way. And,
Yeah.
we can't really provide that in the Third Mind, but we're old friends, and eventually, it took a little while, but eventually we all just kind of settled in, and we understood how much we enjoy playing with each other and how comfortable it was. And now we played quite a bit live. We play with Mark Karen, who was in Rat Dog with Bob Weir.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And it's a very organic chemistry. The band really plays well.
It feels like
And
family.
it feels like family. It's also it's odd because, business wise, it doesn't make a lot of sense. It's not that we don't make money, but we just kind of break even. But I think we're all so musically invested in continuing to be able to explore and grow, and this is what it's allowed us.
Uh-huh.
Michael is an extraordinary musician. I've been very fortunate. I work with a lot of great drummers, and he is one of the most musical that I've ever worked with. And just that foundation allows us to just kind of go for it. And then really working with somebody who did work in the Dead camp, who's just like, don't worry about making a mistake if you really want to learn how to play,
Right.
more improvised music. So for me, it's been just a really profound growth period,
Uh-huh.
which is great for your late 50s to being like, wow, I can play music how I've always wanted to play music.
Right.
The Monks had moments of sheer improvisation, but that band was, especially at the time we were working with you when we were on CZ, we're very tight, very regimented, and I don't like playing music that way anymore.
Uh-huh.
That's changed profoundly. And so it's been interesting because the contrast. Eyelids is very structured and very together. It's a little ramshackle and shambolic in a really good rock and roll way. But so I have the really tight kind of pop aspect, and then I have the third mind, which is just pretty much like set list the same every time, but like every version of every song is completely different,
Right.
and
Right.
you just never know. And Jesse's phrasing kind of can throw us into a completely different zone really quickly. And then, if I'm not doing that, occasionally Camper plays, the Monks occasionally work,
Yep.
and I do a lot of solo work. I do a lot of stuff
Yeah.
where I just play like
How many solo records do you have now?
12.
Wow, really?
Yeah.
I have to admit I have not heard them all because I didn't know the number
Yeah,
was
there
that big.
it's most of it's streamed now. Like it's where everybody finds their music. But the solo thing was really I like to record.
Uh-huh.
And for a long time I was very fortunate. Camper, especially when Camper started working again, I made enough money playing music and I had a day job that I could just go spend money,
Uh-huh.
sometimes too much, but usually I kept the budgets pretty tight. I could spend $5 or $10,000. I had that wherewithal and just go make the records I wanted to make. I never bothered. I did get distribution deals for occasionally, but I
Uh-huh.
never really bothered to go. I just didn't want to do it. I just wanted to organically go off and do what I wanted to do. And some of those records are failures, and some of them I think are quite good. But it was something that I was able to do. And I just defended it. I just was not. I've been on so many labels with Camper and with Dave and with Eyelids and even like Eugene Chadbourne. I just just really and I'm just like that dynamic of having to perform for people is just it can get tiresome. And then just what labels can do for you these days. So I was like, fuck it, I'll just do it. And so the model's really simple: 500 copies, mostly through Bandcamp or through my website.
Uh-huh.
And then the playing model is like I have a great band that I can call on if I've got the budget to do it. And if not, I just play house concerts and
Sure.
record stores and actually, frankly, the environment is now, it's like oftentimes house shows, I can make more money. I mean, I just did a house show
Right.
in Denver on this Third Mind tour, and I made more money on that. I did off the Third Mind tour.
That doesn't surprise me somehow. So what's like is Third Mind, is it still a project or is it a
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
band?
Yeah. It's a band. We are playing in March of 26. We're doing the
Mhm.
West Coast. We just did a full national.
I will see you on that tour.
The last 2 dates were sadly interrupted because Jesse's mom went into hospice.
Um,
So we have to do some make goods in the Denver area. But, it was kind of mixed performance, but everybody's really feeling it right now. The promoters
yeah.
were basically like, look, ticket sales are down like 25% across the board. In some markets,
Uh-huh.
like 50.
Wow.
It's that austere out there. Nonetheless, it looks like we just did the budget and looks like we actually made a little money off of it. And, but it's long and short, we love it. Like we
Yeah.
like each other, and we really like what we've learned how to do as a band. And it's interesting. I mean, I have gotten the "You ruined Dave Alvin" text message. That was an interesting one. And Dave's gotten some hate over it because it's not
Really?
what people expect. But I think what people don't really understand is, I mean, my musical tastes are all over the map, and
Yeah. Yeah.
the Grateful Dead arena. I'm not really a Deadhead, but I have a real love of, like, this goes back to the Monks, but like Quicksilver Messenger Service and
Mhm.
Moby Grape
Right.
and,
All that
the Buffalo Springfield.
all that late
Yeah,
60s Bay Area psychedelia.
right. And
Yeah.
like, there's a Buffalo Springfield bootleg from Boulder, Colorado in 1968. I'm like, God, why could they never record this? I love that kind of music playing.
Right.
And
Right.
Dave is 10 years older than me and grew up watching those bands play as a teenager.
Right.
And he saw Hendrix a couple of times, and he loves Frank Zappa, which is a lot of things that a
Mhm.
lot of people don't know. So this stuff is just woven into him. It's part of who he is, and this is just a means for him to do it. And I think he earnestly feels like we're one of the best bands he's ever worked with, and that's for somebody who grew up. I saw Dave Alvin the first time I saw him was at the University of Redlands when I was 15.
I've seen Dave in a bunch of different iterations, and I always position myself wherever he is because there's that point you're talking about where he lets go, and I'm just like,
Yeah, he's just
it's
extraordinary.
it's like
He's a
seeing
live
God.
wire.
You're just like, wow.
Yeah,
He's channeling something that seems from another place, you know?
and he's really interesting because, like, just specifically technically, he's kinda got his tricks. He's a certain kinda guitar player.
Uh-huh.
He has these certain riffs, that I know all too well, but he has a way
Yeah.
of playing it and assembling it where essentially in any format that he's kinda doing the same thing, but he knows how to adapt it,
Right.
and it's just so smart. It's been very inspiring, and one thing that I've always prided myself in doing is whatever group of musicians I'm playing with, whether I'm doing a solo show in front of 50 people at the Makeout Room in San Francisco or like campers playing on stage at Fillmore, I always try and keep it at a certain level because playing was always very important to me. And that was getting hard to do because what happens with bands over a period of time is that they begin to codify what they do, and the exploration, especially when you're on the road and or don't see each other all the time, the exploration can go away. So to have a band that's just built on the exploratory side is part of the foundation of it. It's just been really great, but yet sometimes I'm just like, man, I just want to play some rock and roll. That's where the eyelids come in. Like, great, because it's like I don't have to think too much. I have just to go like remember the structure of the songs and bash them out. So,
Well,
but
that's
diversity is the key to the
all
whole
right.
thing.
So let me just ask you a final question. You've had this amazing creative life, an amazing musical life, and it's seems as strong as it's ever been. What are your just broad general thoughts about you or the world or your position in terms of just continuing to create and, touch people's lives through that creativity?
Well, 60 is where you begin to really think about things a lot, in
Uh-huh.
terms of like what can you do and how long can you do it for? And I think the general conclusion is that my general group of people very much care for each other, and we want to keep making music in whatever forms we can for as long as we can.
Uh-huh.
I think there is, between the combination of age and economics, there's going to be some downsizing that's inevitable, and we're just trying to figure out how to kind of negotiate kind of the state of the planet and what those kind of economic and aging factors are going to mean and how we make music. There's plenty of projects mapped out. I'm going to do a solo record with basically the third line backing me in
Uh-huh.
December, which is basically re-recording a bunch of songs that I feel like can be delivered better, and those people are down to do that. I'm supposed to make a record with Ian Matthews from Fairport Convention this coming
Wow.
year,
Uh-huh.
essentially with a third mind backing him as well. So there are these really cool opportunities. Economically, it's really tough. I have a 91-year-old mother who's got kind of early onset or late onset Parkinson's and all of these things that, I have to attend to. And at a certain point, I may just have to downsize my house and go and deal with that stuff. But I have a very supportive, loving community that's allowed me to continue to do this, and I will continue to do it as much as I can. And the interesting thing about it is that financially, I haven't made all that much doing it. I've had some good years and bad years, but it's brought a lot of joy to people. And I think one of the things that I've learned as I've gotten older is how important that joy is.
Uh-huh.
And that's kind of recalibrated the whole thing. And it was really Bruce Fleischer from Independent Project, and I had a conversation about kind of how hard things were economically. And he's like, look, man, it's just you have brought so much joy to people. And I think that's an important thing in this world where we stand. So that's really what it is. It is actually spiritual work. That's what it is. And I'm about as atheistic as it gets, but it's spiritual work and it's helpful. And I think it makes people feel better, and I like doing it. So I'm just going to keep doing it.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of The Creative Asylum. A quick favor before you go. If you liked this conversation, please be sure to follow and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. New episodes drop every Tuesday at 10. You can find us on Instagram and on YouTube at Creative Asylum CA. That's Creative Asylum and the letters CA. Our website is thecapod.com. And our Facebook is the same, facebook.com/thecapod. Until next week, when we'll have a new conversation with another creative disruptor, stay creative in life and at work.